Apparently, Finland is teaching children as young as 6 how to spot fake news. So Finland has decided that a national priority is teaching children to spot fake news. Mr. Caulfield is recommending that instead of doing a deep dive and basically hypnotizing yourself on a topic, you do let's say a shallow dive, and then you take it sideways or lateral, meaning that you check what other people are saying about the same topic. If you can simply see and describe the argument on both sides of a topic, doesn't mean you even picked one. You can simply see them. You can just describe them accurately. That alone will trigger some percentage of the public into actually hallucinating. Apparently, Finland is teaching children as young as 6 how to spot fake news. So Finland has decided that a national priority is teaching children to spot fake news. How cool is that? Can you imagine anything that would be really more useful than that to teach a child? That's just about the most useful, smartest thing I've heard in a long time, right? I can't think of anything that would be more useful as an educational concept. Now, obviously, you need to read and write and do math. But in terms of beyond that, teaching people to spot bullshit, that's really important. Now, at the same time, in a weird coincidence, or not, there's an article in the New York Times. At the same day that I see this Finland story, the New York Times has a story about a digital literacy expert at a Washington State University in Vancouver, Mr. Caulfield. And he's developed a 4-point process for figuring out if news is fake. And I'll tell you his method, and then we'll compare it to mine in a moment. So the 4 steps of this. Number 1, so you read a story, and you want to know if it's true or fake news. The first thing you do is slow down to think about it, right? So step 1 is stop. Don't just read it and move on, right? So first thing you do is stop. 2, investigate the source. Who exactly is saying this? Good so far, right? Number 3, find better coverage. In other words, find a news source which you trust more. It just fell apart, didn't it? So in his 4-point process, I haven't even got to the 4th point, and you know the process doesn't work. Because the 3rd point is find better coverage. If you had that capability, you would not be fooled by fake news in the first place. You don't know what is the better coverage, do you? Is it CNN? Is it MSNBC? Is that your better coverage? Is it? Or is it Fox News? Is it Breitbart? So by the 3rd of his 4 points, it completely falls apart. It couldn't possibly work in the real world because we don't know what the better coverage is. Do you know why? The fake news fools us about what the better coverage. We can't tell. Now, I feel like I can tell, and so do you, don't you? You feel like you can tell. I'll bet you think you can tell. But that's the problem. Some of you are right, some of you can tell. But can the average person? Do you think the average news consumer who's more of a casual news consumer, if you're watching this live stream, you're probably in the, top 5% of people who pay attention to news. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. But the general country, they're not paying attention that much. They can't tell which are good sources of news. That's just not something they'll ever be able to do if they're casual consumers. But then the 4th one is trace the claims, quotes, and media to the original context. So this is good. So the Find People hoax, for example, if you had traced it to the original context, played the original video, you would have known it was a hoax. But who in the world is going to do this? You open up your homepage. There are, let's say, on Fox News or CNN maybe 25 stories, and all of them are reasonably important, to the world. Are you going to fact check on your own and, go look for other sources and stuff for 25 stories a day? No, you're not. There's no human way you're going to do this work. But there is one interesting tidbit, so I'm going to ignore the 4 steps. I don't think they're well devised to actually work. But he does say one thing that's good. Don't do a deep dive on something that you're not sure is true, because by the time you're done, you'll think it was true. So if you find a video that's, say, an hour or 2 long, and it's like this whole conspiracy theory, if you make the mistake of watching the whole 2 hours and you don't go check anything else to see if it's right or wrong, you will be brainwashed, because that 2 hours is going to be good. It's going to be really convincing without any counterpoints. So anything that you go into a deep well, you basically are brainwashing yourself. That's QAnon. QAnon's sort of the deep well. You spend a lot of time on conspiracies until you talk yourself into it. So Mr. Caulfield is recommending instead of doing a deep dive and basically hypnotizing yourself on a topic, you do let's say a shallow dive, and then you take it sideways or lateral, meaning that you check what other people are saying about the same topic. So that it would be better to spend 5 seconds seeing what CNN says and 5 seconds seeing what somebody else says than it would be to spend 2 hours looking at what one person says. And that is math I agree on. That's where we're completely agreed. In my book, Loserthink, which would be the book I would give to everybody in Finland who is trying to learn how to determine what is fake news. In fact, it's probably the best book in the world on teaching somebody how to find fake news. And I have one tip in there that I think is better than these 4 steps and better than whatever Finland is teaching their kids. It goes like this. In this country, anyway, I'm not sure it would work everywhere, but in this country, where we have such a siloed news from the left, and we have a siloed news from the right, use the following rule. If both of them report the news the same, it's probably true. So if they say there are freezing temperatures in Texas and the power is out, and they both say that, it's probably true. But if one network says that the president once called neo-Nazis fine people, and you can find another major outlet that says it didn't happen, and here's why, which one do you trust? The one that says it did happen, or the one that says it did not happen? Always go with did not. And it doesn't matter who said what. That's the key point. Doesn't matter if the left says it's true or the right says it's true. If the other one, and it doesn't matter which of the outlets, if there's a major outlet that says it's not true and then shows their work, right? They got to show their work. It's not true. And if you follow that rule, you'll be right at least 85% of the time. I can't tell you it'll work every time. Now, every once in a while you get something that Fox News says is true that Breitbart says is not. Now what do you do? Because they're both associated with the right. Fox News says it's true. The Fine People hoax, for example, it's opinion people were saying it wasn't true, but the news people were sort of staying away from it like maybe it was true. So you weren't quite sure if you were watching Fox News if that was true or not for a long time. But if you read Breitbart, also associated with conservative viewers, it said cleanly, no, it's not true. And often Joel Pollak would be the one, and he'd show you why. Shows his work. Oh, here's the transcript. You can see it's not true. Under those cases, who do you believe? Fox, not so clear, or Breitbart that shows you their work and says it's not true? Breitbart, all right? Now, I'm not saying Breitbart always better than Fox News. I'm saying that whenever there's one that says it's not true, doesn't matter who it is. left or right. Soon as you see one of them say it didn't happen, it probably didn't happen. Matt Taibbi, who I mention often because he's in that rare group of, I guess he'd be called a journalist. I don't know what title he would like to go by. He's got a popular podcast as well. Author, maybe. But he has this problem, when I track him, I just follow him on Twitter, where he'll say something smart and reasonable, and people will just be triggered into cognitive dissonance because you don't expect people to be smart and reasonable. And that alone triggers people into cognitive dissonance. Just the fact that he can talk objectively without the political filter about pretty much anything. He has that special skill. It's very rare, or at least rare that people will exhibit that skill in public, and he does often. So watching him have to deal with the fact that he triggers people to hallucinate is fun, because that's what I do. If you've ever watched my Twitter feed, it's just full of critics who have misinterpreted something I said, and they're really mad at that hallucination that exists only in their head. It has nothing to do with anything I said or did, nothing to do with my opinion, nothing to do with my effect on anything. It's a pure hallucination. But they're coming after me because their hallucinations suggest that I've done something that literally never happened. Said something I didn't say, meant something I didn't mean, something like that. And for a long time, I thought it was just something about me, or the way I talk, or the way I word things. So I thought, I'm just triggering people. I can't even turn it off. If I knew how, I'd turn it off, right? But watching Matt Taibbi do it, a different person, completely different situation for me, and it's more clear when you see the pattern. The pattern is, there's a certain segment that can't handle it if you can see both sides of a topic. That's it. If you can simply see and describe the argument on both sides of a topic, doesn't mean you even picked one. You can simply see them. You can just describe them accurately. That alone will trigger some percentage of the public into actually hallucinating. Like literally imagining they saw or heard something that didn't happen, or read something that didn't happen. And so I'm glad it's not just happening to me, but it's literally, that's all it takes to trigger cognitive dissonance. Acknowledging the other argument. That's it. That's all it takes. Woody Allen is going to have a bad month. I guess there's some new Woody Allen documentary called Allen vs. Pharaoh coming out on Sunday. And that it says it goes beyond the scandalous headlines and makes an argument that Woody Allen got away with the unthinkable in a number of ways. So I think they mean unthinkable child sexual accusations or something. I'm not exactly sure the details of it. But here's what I would say about this. Do you remember I was talking about the 4 steps for recognizing fake news from Mr. Caulfield, and he warned you, don't do a deep dive on one topic. If you watch this documentary, this will be the thing he warned you not to do. If you watch this documentary, which apparently its point of view is that Woody Allen is guilty of unthinkable acts, will you come away believing it was true? Yes, you will. Because if you do a deep dive, you're going to be sort of living in it, and you won't see any counterpoints. You will only see what the documentary wants you to see, and you will believe that Woody Allen is a monster. Is he? How would I know? How would I know, right? I mean, he's been accused of some bad stuff. I wasn't there, but I do know the Murray-Gell-Mann amnesia theory, which says that if you're watching news that you personally know the truth of, let's say it's news about you, and you personally know what's true and what isn't, which is rare, you know that the news is fake. But as soon as it's about something you don't have personal knowledge of, you imagine it might be true. There's no reason to believe that. Now, here's a caution I give you. If you really want to screw with your own brain, Go Google the two recent documentaries about Michael Jackson. One documentary shows two accusers who are very credible, saying that he did horrible things with them when they were children. And if you do a deep dive on that and spend the length of the documentary looking at that, you will walk away thinking that could not be untrue. I mean, that's really, really convincing. Really convincing. And that's certainly the experience I had. I watched that thing and I said, you know, that puts to rest all doubts. Like if anybody thought maybe Michael Jackson wasn't doing terrible things, you just watch that documentary. It's pretty obvious. When you listen to these witnesses, they look very credible. Lots of details. And then Google, I don't know the name of it, but there's a second documentary that came out soon after that, which debunked the first documentary perfectly. Meaning that if you did a deep dive on the debunk, you would never believe the first one again. Because the debunk it's as strong as the accusation. But if you'd only seen the debunk, or you'd only seen the accusation, you would go down that well and you would stay there. If you've only seen one of them, you would be completely sold, because they're both that good, but they're opposite truths. One is really compelling that none of this happened, and it can all be explained in documented, easy, obvious ways that it didn't happen. And the other one is just as convincing that it definitely happened. Now you watch this Woody Allen movie. This is, by analogy, it's very similar to the first Michael Jackson movie. You watch this thing, and I haven't seen it, of course, but I guarantee you that if you watch this documentary that comes out Sunday, you will be convinced that Woody Allen is a monster. Don't be. Now, I'm not saying he's not, and it's not my job to defend him or anybody else. Personally, I have no knowledge of anything that Woody Allen did or did not do. I know what he's accused of. I know what it sounds like. I just live in a world where stuff about celebrities, and in a minor way I'm part of that world, is so often untrue that it would be ridiculous to believe it because of just the math of it. Things like that are usually untrue, most of the time. I don't know that that's the case in this case. I have no reason to believe it's untrue, but I also have no reason to believe it's true. And I would caution you that this advice about going sideways and looking for a little bit from another source that might doubt your source is way more useful than going all the way down the well and having no other well to double check it. So be careful. Now, given that, what do you think about the fact that this documentary exists? Because it's either a great service to the world, maybe, or it's complete bullshit. Because one of those two Michael Jackson documentaries, I don't know which one. One of them's bullshit, and it looks pretty darn compelling. They both do. So I would not believe anything about the Woody Allen story. I wouldn't believe anything. I wouldn't believe he's innocent. I don't think I have any reason to have that judgment. But I also wouldn't believe that any of the specific claims are necessarily true. We don't live in a world in which you could trust any of this. Not any of it. So, and somebody's saying that one option is that they're both bullshit. Yeah, you can't rule out the fact that the truth is somewhere in between or on the side or somewhere completely else. So, I will recommend the following when you're trying to sort out your fake news. Make sure that all the sources reported the same, or it's probably not true. You should listen to people like Matt Taibbi, people like Tim Pool, people like Mike Cernovich, people like Jack Posobiec, people who can tell you something's true or not, and at the very least, they're not lying. Right? They could be wrong. Have you ever seen me be wrong about something? Of course. If you've been watching me for a while, you've seen me be wrong. But I've never lied to you. How would you know, right?